Despite the fact that Republicans won the 2024 election, Democratic superstar and Marjorie Taylor Greene's archenemy, Jasmine Crockett, revealed during a recent MSNBC interview that the American people can expect more chaos and dysfunction from this razor-thin House Republican majority, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, it's been a minute since we've done a video about Jasmine Crockett. She was a freshman Democratic Congresswoman from Texas. She is now entering her second iteration of Congress. She was elected in 2022 and then reelected this past year. And she says that, even though Trump is back in the White House as president and Republicans will control the Senate, she doesn't think that things are going to change in terms of the dysfunction and incompetence we see from House Republicans. And I'll let her take it from here.
Check on him as well.
In terms of, obviously, the Senate is who confirms nominees. The House plays no role in that. But the House, we're getting near what the final numbers are going to be. We're going to talk about that in just the next block. But it's going to be a very narrow majority, narrower than it was, it looks like. And I as a member of the House, I guess it's not fun to be in the minority, but this last House majority was so wildly dysfunctional with a very thin margin. Are you expecting anything different this time around?
No. It is the one thing that I've been telling people, listen, the one thing we can count on is that, number one, they can't count. And number two, the fact that they don't get along with one another. So those are the things that we are holding close to the chest. I'm really excited about Derek Tran. And we are watching another race in California right now. And he is pulled ahead as well, Adam Gray. So we're hoping that we actually end up having more members of the House this 119th than we actually had in this 118th. So we're currently on track to have 214, which is the exact same number that we had throughout the 118th. And if we can pick up this last seat with Mr. Gray, then we'll be looking at having 215. And we know that Donald Trump has plucked out a number of members already, which means that, we may get as close as 217 to 215 if everything kind of works out, which is something that they have never had to endure in the 118th.
All right.
So here again, I'm not a prophet by any stretch of the imagination, but I was initially concerned that this wouldn't be the case. And I'm not as optimistic as Congresswoman Crockett. Now, she would know better than me because she's actually a member of the House of Representatives and she works with these MAGA Republicans on the daily. Of course, my thought process is that given that Trump is back in the White House and Republicans have control of the Senate, that would incentivize more cooperation among House Republicans, right? Because it's not like they have to contend with a Democratic president and a Democratic majority in the Senate, which were major factors as to why there was so much dysfunction. How much do we compromise with Democrats? How much do we draw a hard line in the sand? Now, it's true that the Republicans in the Senate don't have a filibuster-proof majority, so in theory, they would still have to work with Democrats, at least in the other chamber. But of course, Senate Republicans at any time could say, no, screw this. I'm going to carve out an exception to the filibuster, or I'm going to, get rid of it wholesale. They have those options too. So that was why my thought process was, I expect that we're going to see the so-called moderate Main Street Republicans, that's what they call themselves, in the House, working much more smoothly with MAGA because the MAGA fringe in the House of Representatives, to the extent that it's a fringe at all, will have their cult leader back in the White House. So it's almost like, the cult leader will have his eyes on them and he will actually be wielding power. Jasmine Crockett says that given that a bare minimum, a comparable margin, if not an even slimmer margin at the current trajectory, that House Republicans are going to be more inclined to step on rakes and they're going to have less margin for error, in part because Trump is poaching Elise Stefanik and other House Republicans to take positions in the Trump White House. Now, again, I hope she's right, because a dysfunctional Republican Party is better for the country than a functional one, because a Republican Party with unified control of government and competence is going to be in an enormous position to inflict incredible damage on the American people. So we want dysfunctional and incompetent as opposed to functional and competent. It would be one thing if they actually had good ideas and good policies, but they don't. So you want them to step on as many rakes as possible. Now, on the notion of the split of the margin that Democrats would have compared to Republicans, Harry Enton, a CNN analyst, broke this down based on the pending House races, and this is what he had to say on the matter.
My goodness gracious. Yes, the Republicans are going to control the House of Representatives. But if all the current results hold up, we're looking at a record small majority after the Novembers in the last 90 years. You have to go all the way back since the Herbert Hoover administration to find an even smaller majority after the November elections. We're talking about the Republicans with 220 seats, Democrats with 215 if the current House results hold. And keep in mind that this will drop lower if Stefanik Waltz or others like Matt Gaetz leave the Congress.
Yeah, talk to me. This is sort of the best case scenario for Republicans, at least for the next few weeks or months. Where could it go?
Where could it go? It could shrink even further. So let's say Gaetz, Stefanik, and Waltz resigns. We could be looking at, get this.
So this goes to what Congresswoman Crockett was talking about, that right now there's a very good chance it could be a 217-215 split. Now, Gaetz has already resigned from the 118th Congress. He has said that he will not take up the oath of office and assume his seat for the 119th Congress, even though he did win that election. So a lot of people are like, Gaetz is out. On the other hand, I wouldn't put it past Matt Gaetz to lie, and I don't think that the special election that Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has to call for Matt Gaetz, I don't think that's been scheduled yet. But the bottom line is this is not good for House Republicans, at least in theory. Although, again, I think that they have more incentive to work together because Trump will not only be watching them, but he'll be in the White House and they won't have to contend with a Democratic president. But God, I hope Jasmine Crockett is right. She also, I think, dropped a bomb on people who misunderstood Donald Trump's intent with respect to the economy and tariffs during the first half of the conversation with Chris Hayes. So we're going to play some of that now as well.
Jasmine Crockett is a Democrat of Texas. She serves on the Oversight Committee, and she joins me now. Congressman, one of the things that's interesting about this, and particularly on the tariff front, is we have a very different system than the UK with many more veto points. It's much harder when you're elected as a new government in the US to just like get your budget through and start doing it, right? There's a whole bunch of different things. But on tariffs, because of the law and the statutory authority the president's been granted, he can kind of unilaterally do a lot of this stuff while you and Congress just basically watch.
Yeah, you know, my only hope is that we can rid ourselves of Donald Trump half as quickly as the UK got rid of their failed leadership. That is the only hope that I could have, but something tells me that he will stick around for the entire 4 years. But you're absolutely right. And as someone who serves on the Agriculture Committee, one of the things that we saw is that our soybean farmers specifically suffered so much under these tariffs last time, and it wasn't as widespread as what he's proposing this time. The fact that we have Americans that are waking up and saying, wait a minute, are you saying that tariffs are going to negatively impact me? Are you saying that we're going to have to pay for this? It's kind of like that wall that we're still waiting on Mexico to build, right? That they're going to pay for it. No, we're going to pay for it. We're going to be the ones that are suffering. And for those that thought that inflation was bad, even though it has come down, even though that it is honestly, cooled off here a lot quicker than it cooled off in the rest of the world, let me just tell you, it's time to buckle up, Buttercup, because it is about to be on and popping if for some reason he gets half of this done. And right now, looking at the henchmen that he is trying to put into his administration, we are on track to see a lot of these negative things impact our economy.
Now, one of the...
Yeah, well said. I mean, we've talked about this in previous videos, but after Donald Trump won the election, there was a marked increase in Google searches for what is a tariff, which suggested that a lot of people voted for Donald Trump not really knowing what a tariff was and how it would impact them in their pocketbook directly. And then after he threatened to slap a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, and an additional 10% tariff on China, we saw another spike in Google trends for people Googling what is a tariff. So Jasmine Crockett is right. I mean, this is with Donald Trump. He's been tariff friendly in the past. I've mentioned this in a previous video. He is very much predisposed to slap these things on, and the consequences for the American people would be extremely dire, including ironically, the very people who put Trump in power in the first place, and most ironically, the very people who put Trump in power specifically because they wanted him to better manage the economy. Well, if Trump follows through on his threats, you'll be so much worse off than you were under the Biden administration that it's not even funny. And of course, since we're talking ironies, how about another irony, which is that for the second time, Donald Trump will inherit an economy that had to be recovered by a Democrat from the mess left for them by the previous Republicans. So when Donald Trump came into office in January of 2017, he'd inherited the Barack Obama economy, and Barack Obama had to spend his 8 years cleaning up the mess left for him by his Republican predecessor, George Bush. And then when President Biden won the 2020 election and came into power, he had to clean up Donald Trump's mess left for Biden by Trump. And now Trump is succeeding Biden, and Trump will, for the second time, inherit a good economy from a Democrat who had to clean up a Republican's mess. And now the only question is whether or not Donald Trump will continue the modern Republican trend of destroying an economy left for them by a Democrat. It remains to be seen, but again, if Jasmine Crockett, what she's saying is if Trump actually follows through on this, it's going to hurt everyone, including the very people who voted for Trump. So that's where we are. Elections have consequences, and we'll see what the consequences of this particular election are. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.